So this is the last video of this lecture series on spreadsheets. By now you've learned a lot of cool spreadsheet features and hopefully grown to appreciate how powerful and intuitive a software spreadsheets in general are. We've learned about spreadsheet syntax, we've learned about a bunch of functions, we've learned about the difference between copying references and copying values. We then moved on to this really cool intricate function called VLOOKUP, and we talked about visualization, how to make pivot tables. So you see a lot of parallels between the pandas aspect of this course and the spreadsheets aspect of this course. One notable difference being, though, you have to write a lot less code in spreadsheets and it's a lot more intuitive. But it's really easy to draw that parallel, we hope, which is why we placed this spreadsheet lecture after the pandas lecture initially, because we really wanted to build an intuition towards data manipulation before moving on to more high level software like spreadsheets. So this last video is just going to be a wrap up with some logistics and some cool shortcuts I think you'll find useful no matter what context you apply your spreadsheet using. You can be doing or working with absolutely any data possible, but I think you'll still find these shortcuts very useful. But first, just some logistical stuff. So our lab for this week is going to be Intro to Spreadsheets Chapter 1 and 2. It's going to be due next Sunday. As usual, we're going to be releasing it Monday night. Project 1 is due this Friday on the 10th of April. This is obviously just the first module of the project, not the entire project. But the quiz for this lecture is going to be released this Friday. It's going to be due next Monday. This is just the normal cycle we've established every week, where we release a quiz on Friday, and it's due the next Monday. And also you have to fill out this attendance form by next Monday, the April 13th, before lecture, to get attendance credit, and that just entails giving us some feedback and basically filling out the correct code word. For those of you who haven't seen a Piazza post, we've moved on to a code word attendance based system where one of us in one video per lecture, we just pause for 20 seconds randomly and tell you the code word for this lecture, and you just have to fill that out. And this is just a mechanism to ensure that all of you all have actually watched these videos, because we obviously can't do in-person attendance now. We also have a really cool new website. We had a Piazza post about that, and I feel like that's going to be a lot more useful in terms of establishing communication. It has all the resources we've ever referred to or talked about, all the lecture slides sorted by lecture topic. Also has links to all the assignments we've assigned, along with an office hours calendar, a link to a Piazza, and basically all our email IDs if you ever want to contact us for any reason whatsoever. So hopefully that's a big help in terms of establishing communication. So now that we have logistics out the way, let's move on to basically this last part of the spreadsheets lecture, and those are going to be some cool shortcuts. But before that, I just wanted to tell you that I've basically made a few changes to this existing data set. I've added two columns: average customer rating and average critic rating. And I've actually filled these out with random numbers between 1 to 10. So do note that these ratings don't actually correspond to a real life rating of this restaurant, but I just needed some data of this form for a demo I'm going to do in the future. So I just fabricated these columns, but do note that this is not real data. So just quick note, these two are the only changes I've made to this existing data set. Otherwise, the exact same data set we've been using for the previous videos. So the first shortcut I wanted to teach you was basically using the command or the control key if you're on a Windows system to select non-contiguous data. So as I'm sure a lot of you all know, if you want to just copy paste something, what you want to do is basically Command C whatever you want to copy, or Control C, and then Command V it. You can paste a value just like that. If you want to copy entire columns, you do the exact same thing. Select the two columns, Command C, Command V. But what happens if the two columns you maybe want to select, or the two cells of data you want to select and copy, are non-contiguous? What if you want to basically take the postal code for this first restaurant and the phone number and copy it together? So what you'd want to do for this is you can obviously individually copy each value, but a little somewhat more efficient way is basically just pressing the command key to select all the relevant data you want to copy. So I still have my command key or control key pressed, and now I just select postal code, longitude, phone number. These three cells are non-contiguous, and by that what I mean are they're not adjacent to each other, but you can still just, now that I've selected these three cells by keeping my command key pressed, you can just command C. This copies the three values and paste them over here. So hopefully that made sense to all of you. I didn't select the longitude over here even though it was highlighted, but this is basically command. You have these two selected. The dotted lines tell you that these two have been copied if you ever want validation for whether something's been copied, and you paste and you get the exact same values. So again, very useful trick to have up your sleeve. Really saves you a lot of time when you have to do a lot of it across a day, especially when you're working with column data or when you want to copy maybe data points that aren't even in the same row, the same column. So easy for you to just select multiple cells, copy, and then paste if you'd like to. So the second shortcut I want to teach you was how you'd want to, how you'd want to basically, the distinction between pasting values versus pasting references. So the example I'd want to use here is, suppose you want to find the sum of the average customer rating and the average critic rating for this first restaurant. You can just do equal to whatever the cell value for this is plus the cell value for this, and you should get a 12. Now if you want to copy this 12, what you'd intuitively think you'd want to do is basically command C this cell and command paste this cell over here. But then that doesn't give you a 12, that gives you a 17, and the reason for that is you copied the reference, which is L2 plus M2 over here, along with Excel being smart and basically shifting these references by one to the right, because the value where you want to paste is one to the right of N2. So L2 plus M2 turned into M2 plus N2, which is basically just shifting the references to the right by one, because this cell is to the right of this cell. If you did want to basically just paste the explicit value 12 though, what you'd want to do is command C, and instead of using command V, all you'd want to use is command shift V. Hopefully that makes a lot of sense, and it again saves you so much time when you start working with data on a column level rather than a single cell level. So for example, if I want to find the sum of the average customer rating and the average critic rating, so let's just call this sum of customer plus critic. This will be the sum of these two, or I can just do equal to this plus this and apply this to basically every data point in this column. So this goes all the way down until the bottom of this data set. Another cool shortcut, FYI, is you can just do that by double clicking this. So instead of dragging this all the way down, all you have to do is double click this and it'll apply the formula this has automatically to every column it's applicable to to the end of the data set. So it did that for every value over here till the end of the data set. Now if I wanted to basically copy this explicitly, what I do is command C, and if I did command V, I wouldn't get the same values, but if I did command shift V, I'd get the exact same value. So you can really see the difference between pasting values versus pasting references. This pasted a reference adjusted for the column change, which was basically moving everything to the right by one. This just pasted these explicit values. So just knowing the distinction between pasting values and pasting references is very important, and the only difference in pasting values and pasting references is you add a V when you want to paste explicit values. So hopefully that made sense to you. The last shortcut I really wanted to talk about was filtering. And this is again very, very, very useful. And what this allows you to do is basically filter data really intuitively. So in pandas, if you remember, you had to write a bunch of code for you to filter data that met certain conditions. Here all you want to do is create a filter, and you can actually create filters and save those filters. So suppose I want to create a filter that only has restaurants that have an average customer rating of more than 5. So what I do is create new filter view and name this filter view something like customer rating more than 5. And what I do over here is basically the moment you have a filter view, oh, yeah, and now what you want to do is basically you have access to this icon over here, and this gives you all the values of average customer rating. So it's 1 to 10. Since you only want values that are more than 5, what you'd want to do is basically you see this check mark over here, you just remove these for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, and now you only have rows that have a customer rating of more than 5, and that's been saved to customer rating more than 1. We can name it whatever we want, and you can do this for basically, or more than 5, beg your pardon. And you can do this for any filtration technique you want. So if you want the sum to be basically lesser than 10, you want to only look at restaurants that have the sum of the average customer rating and average critic rating be less than 10. Again, we can create a new filter. Let's call it sum lesser than 10. Select only values that meet your criteria. So everything greater than 10, you just want to cross off. And now sum lesser than 10 is basically a filtered view of your original data set. With only some values lesser than 10. Nothing's greater than 10 over here, as you can see. If you want to go back to your original data set, you just go to none, and you have your original data set with no filters. So really, really cool intuitive feature. Makes filtering so much easier than writing code in pandas, as you can probably imagine, but something very useful for you to have no matter what the context the data you've been using in. On that note, there are just so many shortcuts I can talk about, but unfortunately we're out of time. Thank you so much for tuning into this lecture. We hope you have a great week and stay safe, all of you.